In the plant kingdom, the next group are the Angiosperms. Angiosperms are the well developed plant group in the entire plant kingdom. These are phanerogams, that is flower formation is present, and they also produce fruits and seeds. So here in gymnosperms we had seen that seeds formation is present, but they lack the fruit. But here the fruit formation is also been seen. That's why these seeds are not naked seeds, but they are enclosed by the fruit wall or the pericarp. And these are Tracheophyta group of plants. That is, they have the vascular tissue like xylem and phloem. Then these are embryophytes. In the life cycle, after the formation of zygote, the zygote undergoes mitosis to form a diploid structure called as embryo, which leads to the formation of sporophytic generation. Then these are non-archegoniates. That is, archegonia is not formed. Then this type of characteristic features can be seen in the angiosperms. So here in angiosperms there is a lot of diversity in habitat, morphology, structure, shape of the other things. So here related with this one, some of the plants are growing as hydrophytes, some of them are growing as xerophytes, some are growing as majority of them are growing as mesophytes, and some we can see in the form of epiphytes, heliophytes, ceophytes, lithophytes, like different types of habitat been observed in the members of angiosperms. But basically we say hydrophytes, xerophytes and mesophytes. Then we see the habit of them. Some of the plants are herbs, some of them are growing as shrubs, and some of them are growing as a tree-like habit. In this one, some of them are showing prostrate stems, and some of them are showing erect stems, and some are the creepers, and some of them are the climbers, and some of them are woody climbers. Here in angiosperms, in the size there is a lot of diversity, starting from the tiny microscopic plants like Wolfia, which is considered to be the smallest angiospermic plant, to the biggest one, that is a eucalyptus plant, which grows around 100 meters of height, which is considered to be the one of the tallest plant. So likewise a lot of diversity from the smallest to the biggest plant. Then here in these members we can see the sporophytic generation and the gametophytic generations. The sporophytic generation is the dominant stage, which is diploid, multicellular, independent, phototrophic plant body, which is having root system and shoot system. When it comes to the root system, as we know, this is the part which is underground and fix the plant into the substratum or the soil. Apart from that one, it also absorbs the nutrients like minerals and water from the soil. So here there are two types of root systems are there. One is the taproot system and fibrous root system. Apart from these two types, so we can also see the presence of adventitious roots in the members of angiosperms. That is the roots which develop from any part of the plant body other than the radicle. Those are called as the adventitious roots, which are produced to provide some additional support or additional need to the plant body. Then coming to the shoot system, here the main axis of the shoot system is called as stem, and this stem may be aerial or sometimes subaerial or underground also, and this stem will bear the branches which produces the lateral appendages like leaves, flowers and fruits on them. So here if we take the branches, so different types of branching may be there. It may be dichotomous branching, or sometimes it may be monopodial branching or sympodial type of branching can be seen. But at the same time, there are some members in which the branching is completely absent, like in Cocos nucifera example. And maybe the branches present or may not be present, but they produce the leaves either directly on the stem or on the branches. And here the arrangement of leaf is called as a phyllotaxy. It may be either in the form of alternate phyllotaxy, opposite phyllotaxy or oraled phyllotaxy. So here the leaves are considered to be the photosynthetic organs, main photosynthetic organs, which are green in color and considered to have the stomata and helping in the function called as exchange of gases and transpiration. Then let us come to the other part, that is before the flower you have to talk about inflorescence. Here the arrangement of the flowers is in a specific manner. So the mode of arrangement of the flowers is called as a inflorescence. So likewise the cymose type, racemose type are being observed in different members of angiosperms. Then coming to the flowers. So flowers are considered as the reproductive organs or reproductive structures. Here the flowers are being observed in the gymnosperms for the first time, but the flowers in gymnosperms generally lack perianth in them, but here the flowers of angiosperms will have perianth also. That is sepals and petals are present. Apart from the perianth, they also have the essential organs which are participating directly in the sexual reproduction. Those are andrecium. Individual parts of andrecium are called as stamens, and gynoecium. Individual parts of gynoecium are called as carpels. So stamens are considered to be the male reproductive organs, and gynoecium or the carpels are considered as a female reproductive organs. So here sepals, petals, that is perianth, are not concerned directly in the reproductive process, but the sepals are useful for protection and petals are useful for attracting the insects. So here what is the need of attraction of the insects means the insects are the agents of pollination which will help in transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of the different flowers present on the same plant or on the different plants. If you see the reproductive organs, like starting with stamens. The stamens contain long stalk like structure and a swollen part at its tip. So the long stalk, which is called as a filament, and the tip, which is a swollen, is called as a anther. So here filament is considered to be the proximal region, whereas anther is a distal part. Then inside the anther, pollen sacs or the pollen chambers are present. This pollen chamber or pollen sacs contains a sporogenous tissue, which is diploid in its nature. This sporogenous tissue, when they undergo mitosis, they produce microspore mother cells, and these microspore mother cells are also diploid in their nature. These microspore mother cells will undergo meiosis to produce tetrad of microspores, which are haploid in their nature, and from this tetrad the 4 microspores are separated to produce the pollen grains or microspores. The pollen grains are produced inside the microsporangium or the pollen sac or pollen chamber, and when the anther become matured, the pollen grains are released from the pollen sac or from the anther, and they will reach the stigma of right type or the wrong type. Right type and wrong type means, here if the pollen grains reach the stigma of the flower which belongs to the same species, so we call it as right type, and if the pollen grains reach the stigma of the flower belongs to different species, so we call it as a wrong type. Likewise, the pollen grains are transferred to the stigma by a process called as pollination. Here the pollination is called as indirect type of pollination, because the pollen grains are reaching the stigma but not the ovule directly. So here when they reach the stigma, so here the interactions will occur between the stigma and the pollen grains. So that is what the stimulus is received by the pollen grains if the stigma receives the right type of pollen grains, and in the meantime what happens, the pollen grain will produce the pollen tube. So actually here there are different agents of pollination are present. Those are it may be with the help of wind, we call it as anemophily, or it may be with the help of water, hydrophily, or it may be with the help of insects like entomophily. Likewise, there are different agents of pollination which are helping in transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma. But out of all of the agents, entomophily is the most frequent method of pollination which occurs in the angiospermic plants. Then when they reach, I said that the pollen grains start germinating and produces the pollen tube, and in the meantime the pollen grains, inside the pollen grains the division will be taking place, leading to the formation of male gamete. This pollen tube will pierces to the stigma, style and ovary, finally reach the ovule. And when they reach the ovule, the pollen tube will burst, or a small pore is formed at its tip to release the male gametes into the embryo sac. In the essential organs, the next one is gynoecium, which contains individual parts called as carpels. So each carpel contains 3 parts. That is stigma, style and ovary, and inside the ovary the ovules are present. So ovules are surrounded by the ovary wall, and inside the ovules, you know that a diploid tissue called as nucellus is present, and this nucellus is surrounded by a protective layers, that is called as integuments. Based on the number of integuments, ategmic, unitegmic and bitegmic ovules are present. So here this is a nucellus, and this part is called as chalaza, and this part is called as a micropyle region, and this is a stalk of the ovule, that is funicle or funiculus. Then here inside the nucellus, one of the cell become larger, and that is the initial cell for the formation of megaspore mother cell. So here that is called as archisporial cell. So from that the megaspore mother cell is formed, which is diploid in its nature, and this megaspore mother cell will undergo meiosis to produce a tetrad of megaspores, which are haploid in their nature. But here there are different methods are there after this step. That is sometimes one megaspore may be functional, sometimes two are functional, and sometimes all the four are functional. Based on that one, from here the female gametophyte is formed, which is haploid in their nature. So here out of these tetrads, if one functional megaspore is forming into female gametophyte, we call it as monosporic type, and if two functional megaspores are forming into female gametophyte, we call it as bisporic type, and if all the four megaspores are remain functional producing female gametophyte, we call it as tetrasporic type. Likewise, different methods of female gametophyte is present. In this, the female gametophyte which is formed is called as embryo sac, and this embryo sac is present inside the nucellus. And this embryo sac generally contains 7 cells and 8 nuclei. So it is organized into 3 parts. One is called as egg apparatus, antipodals and central cell. Here the egg apparatus contains egg cell and 2 synergid cells. Apart from that one, the 3 antipodals are present towards the chelazal end, and 2 nuclei are present in the central cell. So those are the 2 polar nuclei. One is coming from upper side and other is coming from the lower side. In this manner, so when the pollination have been taken place, I said that the pollen tube will enter into the embryo sac and release the 2 male gametes into the embryo sac. Out of that, 1 male gamete, which is haploid, will fuse with the egg cell, which is also haploid, and resulting in the formation of zygote, which is a diploid in its condition, and this process is called as syngamy or first fertilization, or we can call it as a true fertilization, because 2 gametes, that is male and female gametes, are participating here. Then as we said that the pollen grain produces 2 male gametes. So the second male gamete is there, no? So that second male gamete, which is haploid in its nature, will fuse with the secondary nucleus. So secondary nucleus is formed from the fusion of upper polar nucleus and the lower polar nucleus in the central cell. That's the reason why the secondary nucleus will be in diploid condition. So here this fusion will take place, leading to the formation of primary endosperm cell, which is triploid in its nature, because 1 set of chromosomes from male gamete and 2 sets of chromosomes from the secondary nucleus are present. The fusion occurs between 3 sets, leading to the triploid primary endosperm cell. So here this process is called as triple fusion, and here this is the second fertilization which is taking place inside the embryo sac. And here this is not a true fertilization, because only the male gamete is participating but not the female gamete. And as a result of the fertilization, two structures are formed. One is zygote and primary endosperm nucleus. Both of them are present inside the embryo sac only. And here, as two times of fertilization is taking place, we call it as a double fertilization. So this is a unique feature present in the angiosperm group of plants, because up to gymnosperms we can see only single fertilization, only one times of fertilization will be taking place, but here the two times of fertilization taking place, that's why we call it as double fertilization process. And here the post fertilization changes will be taking place in the angiosperms. In that process, the major changes are the zygote, which is formed here, will be converted into embryo, and the primary endosperm cell will be converted into endosperm. Here the endosperm will also be in the triploid condition. Then the ovules are converted into seeds, and ovary is converted into fruit wall. Likewise, some complex changes will be taking place after the fertilization. We call them as post-fertilization changes. Likewise, the seed formation, the fruit formation will be seen in the members. So once the seeds have been formed, they contains the embryo and endosperm inside them. Then the endosperm is providing nutrition to the developing embryo, and the embryo, as we know, it contains radicle, plumule and cotyledons. When the seed germinates, the embryo will be converted into the next generation of sporophytic plant body, from which the radicle is giving rise to root, plumule is giving rise to the shoot, and the cotyledons are giving rise to the primary leaves. The cotyledons will provide nutrition to the initial growing stages till they form the leaves by themselves. So that is these are the changes that are taking place during the life cycle of angiospermic plants. In gymnosperms, there are two classes or there. One is dicotyledons and monocotyledons. Dicotyledons are the one in which two cotyledons are present inside the seed, and monocotyledons are the one in which seed contains only single cotyledon. So likewise, two further classes are there in the angiosperms. Here the dicots and monocots are further divided into the series, subclasses, series, orders and families, likewise based on the similarities and the dissimilarities.